All right, we'll say good morning. Let us begin. Today's daf is Kuf Beis 102. We're actually picking up at the Mishnah on the top of Kuf Beis 102. We thank our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan, Justin and Abigail Rosemore, for dedicating all the Shir and Shoshos this month in memory of their beloved son, Kobi Chaim Yaakov David, Zichron Levracha ben Yosef Tzadok. To thank our monthly sponsor, Alan and Sue Marowitz and family, Jason, Jebra, Justin, Rebecca, Mindy, Simcha, and all the grandchildren, for dedicating all the Shrim and Joshos this month. The amount of our Refuah Shlema for Sue, Shulam Istova, Bas Mindel. We thank our Day of Learning sponsor, Avram. Oh, I'm sorry. Our Day of that's it. Good. We thank our sponsors for today. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, and those who require a refuah, should Hashem have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. And I will say with that, let us begin. So beautiful daf ahead of us today. Says the Mishnah, Hazorik v'niskar me'achar sheyatza samyados. Well, it's an interesting case. In this situation, so remember again, we've been focusing over here on violation of Shabbos from a shogeg perspective. Right? So shogeg means inadvertent or accidental violation. So in this case over here, a person throws an object, and then afterwards he remembers that it's Shabbos. And he remembers that it's Shabbos after the object left his hand, but before it rested, before it came to rest. So just to understand, halacha l'maisa, if a person inadvertently transgresses Shabbos, they're chayav achatos. If a person intentionally violates Shabbos, then unfortunately, chas v'shalom, there's a chiyuv misa. Right? There could be a death penalty depending on the circumstances. We're not getting into death penalties right now. We're much more focused on carbonic liability. So the Mishnah therefore says, if a person throws an object and after it left his hand, but before it came to rest, he remembers that it's Shabbos, or kalta acher, someone else catches it. So we'll say in this case over here, Reuven threw an object, right? And again, Reuven totally forgot that it was Shabbos, and before the object comes to rest, Shimon catches it, or Kalta Kelev, or a dog caught it in its mouth, Ocean Isafo, or the object is burned up before it ever comes to rest, Pater. Ultimately, in all of these cases, halacha l'maisa, the individual is Pater. The individual is Pater. Now we'll see why the individual is Pater, because l'maisa, the Kamdanam in all of these cases is that you did not have one total act done b'shogeg. Right? Remember again, the shogeg act was somehow interrupted. Either interrupted by a change of cognition, Reuven realized that it's Shabbos, or it was interrupted because the object got burned up, it was interrupted because someone else caught it, or it was interrupted ultimately because the dog caught it in its mouth. In all of these cases, halacha l'maisa, there is no liability. When we say patra, remember again, patra always means patra aval aser, or it's obvious you're not allowed to do this, but l'maisa, if you did it, you are exempt from carbonic liability. Zarak lasos chabura, let's say a person threw an object with the intention to cause harm to another. Bein ba'adam, bein behema. Either I had intention to cause harm to a person or to an animal. B'niskar, and then a person remembered that it was Shabbos. Achlo nases chabura, before he has the chance to cause harm. Pater, then again, remember pater from carbonic liability. So remember again, same idea. When we say pater, that's because you're only chayav a carbon chatas for Shabbos violation if it turns out that you were unintentional from beginning to end. But if at some point in time you realize that it was Shabbos, you realize that what you were doing is Asr, so ultimately, again, that disrupts carbonic liability. Ze'aklal. So here's the rule. Kol chayve chatos, einon chayoven achetechi tchilasan v'sofan shkaga. The both say on Shabbos, the only time that you are chayve chatos, if your act was a shogeg from beginning to end. If you were a shogeg from beginning to end, then Allah chalamais you are chayve chatos. However, tchilasan shkaga v'sofan zadan. But I will say, if you started out as a case of shogeg, and then what? Afterward, it turned intentional. So we'll say that's the first case of the Mishnah. Reuven threw the object, and when he threw it, he totally forgot that it was Shabbos. Then, as the object is flying through the air before it comes to rest, he realizes, it's Shabbos. So that by the time the item landed, he realized that now it was Shabbos. So we'll say that's a case of Tchilas Shogeg Sofan Mezid. Therefore, again, Tchilas and Shkaga Sofan Zadan, or Tchilas and Zadan Besofan Shkaga, or a person at first remembers when he throws it, he knows that he's doing something wrong, but that subsequently he forgot that it's Shabbos. Pturin, ultimately, I will say in these cases, there will be no carbonic liability. Ad shetehei tchilasan v'sofan shkaga. So we'll say halacha l'maisa. One is only chayiv for a carbon if the act was a shogeg from beginning to end. From beginning to end. Good. Shabbos says, the Gemara makes a very interesting observation. Hanacha chayiv. Now, remember again, let's go back for just a moment. The first case of the Mishnah was a situation where a person throws an object. Now, when he throws it, he remembers that he forgot that it was Shabbos. He was shogeg. And then we'll say, what happens? He remembers after it left his hand. Now, we'll say, then the Mishnah says, and subsequently, another person caught it, the dog caught it, or it was incinerated, so it never ends up landing. So the Gemara says, Hanacha chayiv. Now, we'll say, the inference from the Mishnah is, the reason why you're potter is because someone or something prevented the object from coming to rest in a normative fashion. But it sounds like from the Mishnah that had the object come to rest, I would be chayiv. V'halo nizkar tanan. I'm sorry, v'halo nizkar, but one second. We'll say, so what it sounds like, remember, just to understand the way the first case of the Mishnah plays out, Reuven throws the object, right? He threw it because he forgot that it was Shabbos. Then what happens? He remembers. But then, the Mishnah seems to read, someone else caught it, the dog caught it, it got incinerated, he's pater. Which sounds like, had the object actually come to rest, he would have been chayiv. But why would he be chayiv? L'maisa, remember again, as the object was mid-air, he remembered that it was Shabbos. If that's the case, this is a situation of tchilas shogeg, sofan zadon. The beginning is shogeg, but the end is intentional. Utnan, and we learned kol chayve chatos inon chayavin ad shetei tchilasan v'sofan shkaga. And we learned in the Mishnah, the klal, right? What's the principle? You're only chayav a carbon chatas on Shabbos if what? If halacha l'maisa, both the beginning and the end of the act was shogeg. So both say, therefore, in a typical case, or without a typical, in the case that the Gemara is describing, where Reuven threw the object, and when he threw it, he forgot that it was Shabbos. As the item is soaring through the air, he remembers that it's Shabbos. Then it lands, right? Whatever it is, it lands 4 amos later in Rosh Hashanah, or it lands in a different Roshos. Bepashtus, he should not be chayiv, right? Because remember again, the Mishnah said the only time you're chayiv is if the beginning and end of your act is shogeg. But it was seen that in a case like this, where the beginning is shogeg, but then you have an awareness and the object lands while you're in the state of cognitive awareness that what you're doing is wrong, you should be pater. So what's the case? Seifa asan melaksa umasna. Rav Kana says the case of the Seifa is dealing with aliksa umasna. So we'll say, look at Rashi for just a moment. It's actually interesting. Asan aliksa Seifa diktani achete tchilas v'sof and shkaga. So the end of the Mishnah that says that you're only chayiv if the beginning and end of your act is shogeg is talking about a case of aliksa umasna. Rashi says asan aliksa umasna. Liksa eats katan shakafo rosha v'tzarich lechamorim nosim dardurim shal yayin shetoknos. So we'll say, to make this very simple, the liksa masna, the liksa is kind of like when they used to transport barrels over a donkey. So what they would do is the barrels would be tied together and would be put on the back of the donkey. Then you would have like another locking mechanism to keep everything in place. The liksa is that locking mechanism. The misna is the rope. So both say, so if you could imagine over here, what's happening is as follows. Look at Rashi umisna. Chaval kolomar lo matukma seifa ela bezorik liksa hakasher bechavel katan kedarko va'oches hachavel biado ukisheniskar haya biado lechos hachavel ulaakiv zrikas hilchasa shalotanuach hilchach tchilas shogeg v'sofo mezid upater. So we'll listen to this. So the Gemara is setting up the case as follows. You're holding this rope, and this we'll call it lock. Now the lock is attached to the rope. So we'll say, if you can imagine, you throw the lock, but the rope is still in your hand. So when you threw the lock, you forgot that it was Shabbos, But then as it's going through the air, you remember that it's Shabbos. Now, because you remember that it's Shabbos, you have the ability to pull it back if you want to and prevent liability from occurring. If you choose not to pull it back, that is a case of Tchilas Shogeg Sofo Zodon. You start out as a Shogeg, but ultimately, again, it quickly develops into an intentionality case. Finish reading Rashi. Aval Zarak Tzor V'Chefetz Kisheniskar Ein Biodo La'akev Kulei Shogegu V'Niskar D'Chaim Reisha Ashmin Rabusa Da'af Agav D'Niskar Lo Miftar. Supposed to listen to this. So the Gemara wants to make the following distinction. Let me start with the simpler case. When you throw an object, and you throw it because you forgot that it's Shabbos, remembering at some point later, while the object is soaring through the air, that it's Shabbos is irrelevant. Why is it irrelevant? Because there's nothing you can do to stop that process. Therefore, the Gemara is suggesting that act will be labeled as a shogeg act, right? So Reuven throws the object, and as it's going through there, he realizes, oy vavoy, it's Shabbos. Okay, there's nothing, that new mindset does not impact the act at all, because the act is already happening. So both said the Gemara is suggesting now the Havamina is, that's called shogeg. That's called shogeg all the way through. So now, even though we know that by the time it lands, Reuven knows that it is Shabbos, that is still called shogeg. Okay, so what's the case of Tchilas Shogeg and Sofo Zadon? Simple. It's the case of the rope and the lock. I will say what happens. Reuven throws the lock. He has the rope in his hand still. Now when he throws the lock, he knows that what? That he forgets that it's Shabbos. As the item is soaring through the air, he realizes, oy vavoy, it's Shabbos. Now in that moment when he realizes that it's Shabbos, he has the ability to do what? To yank it back and prevent liability from occurring. Let's say, boss, I remember again, it's traveling Dalet Amos. Before he gets Dalet Amos, he remembers, oh, it's Shabbos. He has the ability to yank it back. Failure to do so creates a mazid situation. That would be a case of tchilas and shkaga, v'sofo zodom. That would be a case of the beginning, where the beginning is a shogeg and the end is a mazid. So we'll say, so again, just understand what the Gemara is holding right now in this moment. In this moment, the Gemara is assuming that in a typical case where you throw something, the moment it leaves your hand, the das you have at the moment it leaves your hand is the das that accompanies that object all the way through. Even if your actual level of cognition or awareness changes, because that change of awareness does not impact the object, therefore, again, it doesn't change the status of the act. So if when Reuven threw the object, he was a shogeg, even if before the object lands, he realizes, oh, it's Shabbos, that's still called shogeg. The case of Tchilas Shogeg and Sofo Zodon, beginning Shogeg and Mazid, is a case of where the change of your awareness has the ability to impact the action, or the object, I should say. For example, you threw the lock, you're still holding the rope in your hand. When you realize that it's Shabbos, you have the ability to yank it back. So if you do so, the whole thing is called Shogeg. If you fail to do so, it's called the beginning Shogeg and Mazid. So the Gemara says, one second, Amarav Kahana, Likso Masna, Ogdo Biyaduhu. That's not a good case. Now, as I will say, Halacha Lamaisa, you're not really chayiv anyway for going in, and even if you throw that lock and you have in mind and you know that it's Shabbos, you still won't be chayiv for Otzah. Why not? Because Lamaisa, the rope is still in your hand. And as long as the rope is still in your hand, that is not called an act of transfer. Which I will say is actually an interesting idea. So if you're holding the rope, even though you throw the lock, and maybe the lock goes more than 4 amas in a sarabim, because you're holding the rope and you have the ability to yank it back at any time, that's not called an act of transfer. So therefore, what's the case? Kigon shenis kavin lasos chabura. So maybe the case is where a person had intention to cause harm through the act of throwing. Rashi says over here, Kigon shenis kavin lasos chabura. Betchilaso b'shigagas Shabbos v'niska achlo nases hachabura uli olam belikso misna ukigon shniskavin lasos chabura dahaim yishum zechiruhu t'miftar shahaya biyado lahachzir nimsa sofo zadon. So also maybe the case ultimately is of tchilasa shogeg v'sofo zadon is where you throw an object with the intention to do harm, to harm a person or to harm an animal, and before the harm is done, you remember that it's Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, okay, but that case is stated explicitly in the Mishnah. Hazor glasos chabura, Bein ba'ada, bein bebehema. Person throws an object with the intention to harm another person or an animal. V'niskar shelo nases chabura, and you remember before the chabura was done, pater. Ultimately, again, in that case, a person is pater. Ela amaravas, Rav says, rather, what's the case? B'ma'avir. Ultimately, again, where a person, Rabbi says, is not throwing, but maybe where a person is carrying. Look at Rashi. Ela amarava. Zeh klal ma'avir arba amos b'shus harabim. V'nizkar kodim sheviru dalad amis. Asa shahaya biyado lamod b'makom sheniskar v'alzorek l'miftar b'skres. So maybe, ultimately the case of tchilas shogeg and sofo zadon is not a case of throwing, but it's a case of carrying, which actually is a simple case, which I will say is Ruvain's carrying an object. So when he starts out carrying the object, so again, a simple case, he's standing in Rosh Hashanah and he starts carrying an object dalad amis. And as he starts walking, he totally forgot that it's Shabbos. He's about to step into Amma number 4 and he realizes the light bulb goes off. It's Shabbos. So I'll say in that moment, he has the ability, should he so choose, to stop walking. If he continues to do so, that'll be a case, now he turns into Mazid. That's a case of where he started off with Shogig, ended off with Mazid, and the Gemara is suggesting that such an individual is pater from bringing a carbon, to which the Gemara says, V'ha zeh klal diktoni azrika katoni. But here's the problem. The Mishnah's case is set up as a case of one where one is throwing the object, not where one is carrying the object. Ella Amarava, therefore Rava says as follows, Tarti katoni. In reality, the Mishnah is teaching us two different things, two different halachas. Number one, Hazorik v'niskar, me'acha sheniskar, Hazorik, if a person throws an object, and remember again, when he threw it, he didn't know that it was Shabbos, he forgot that it was Shabbos, v'niskar, me'acha shiyatza samiyado, and then after the object leaves his hands, he remembers that it's Shabbos, inami, niskar, v'kolta achara kolta kelef, or, furthermore, he remembers after the object left his hand, but someone else caught it, or the dog caught it, Osha Nisrafa, pater. Ultimately, again, he's pater. Ravashi has a little bit of a different understanding. He says, katani. In reality, the Mishnah is missing a line, and here's how it is to be read. Here we go. Hazorik v'niskar me'achar shiyatza samiyado. So we'll say, the Mishnah teaches the following halacha. Person throws an object, and he, b'shogeg, and after he throws it, he remembers that it's Shabbos. After he throws it, he remembers that it's Shabbos. Okay? So Azorik, v'niskar me'achar shiyatza samiyado. Then in that case, kolta acher or kolta kelev, oshen nisrafa, pater. If someone else caught it, or another person caught it, or a dog caught it, or it became incinerated midair, ultimately, again, you're pater. And I will say, now why am I pater? Why would a person be pater in all of these cases? So let's remember again, the reason you're pater in these cases is because there was never a hanacha. Remember again, the halacha is that you're only chayiv for hotzah, for transfer of an object, if there's an akira, an uprooting, and the hanacha, a placement down. In these cases over here, there was an akira, I threw the object, but the object never came to rest, right? Either because a person caught it, the dog caught it, or because it just got burned up. But what can you infer from this? Hanacha chayiv. And I will say, interesting enough, what I can infer from that is that if the object did come to rest, I would be chayiv a carbon, even though what? My level of cognition changed. When I threw it, I forgot that it was Shabbos. And as the object was going through the air, I recognized that it is Shabbos. So it sounds like even though by the time the object landed, I was no longer a shogeg, I would still be chayiv a carbon. To which the Gemara says, you're right. But when is that so? Here we go. Shechazar v'shachach. He'll say this is where ultimately again a person forgot that it was Shabbos, remembered that it was Shabbos, and subsequently forgot that it was Shabbos. That's when you will be chayav v'chatos. So I will say, as long as the akira and the hanacha occurred b'shogeg, even if there was a level of cognition, of awareness in the middle, that middle awareness does not change it from a shogeg act, and therefore a person will still be chayiv. Let's say again, when a person threw it, when Reuven threw it, he was a shogeg. then he remembered that it was Shabbos. And when the object landed, he still remembered that it was Shabbos, pater. He will be pater from the chatos. Why? Here's the principle. Shekol chayve chatos einon chayavin ad shetei tchilasan v'sofan shkaga. Because what's in general, you can't be chayve chatos until both the beginning and the end of your act is done b'shogi. Shabbosai, the Gemara is saying something really incredible over here. So essentially, two cases the Mishnah is coming to teach me. Case number one is Reuven throws the object, and he throws it, he forgot that it was Shabbos. So he throws it. And as the object is going midair, he remembers that it's Shabbos. Okay? Now in case number one, something now interrupted the hanacha. Something interrupted the object coming to rest. Either a person caught it, a dog caught it, or it got burned up midair. So in that case, I will say, obviously a person is pater. Now really, in reality, there you're pater on two different levels. You're pater because, first of all, you had a cognitive change. You know that it's Shabbos, so you're no longer a shogeg. Furthermore, there was never a hanacha. There was never a placement of the object. Case number two, Rabbi says as follows, where ultimately, again, Reuven throws the object, and again, he was shogeg. He did not know that it was Shabbos. Then what happens? As the object is soaring through the air, he remembers, it's Shabbos. And then what happens? He forgets again. So that by the time the object comes to rest, he has once again forgotten that it's Shabbos. Says the Gemara, halacha l'maisa, under those circumstances, he will be chayav chatos. Why? Because that's called shogeg. That's what the Mishnah means. As long as the beginning is shogeg and the end is shogeg, even if there's some level of mazid in the middle, that is still called a shogeg act. Pretty dramatic. Says the Gemara, Zaklal, kol chayve chatos. So the Mishnah then said a principle, right? In order to be chayve chatos, you must be shogeg in the beginning and in the end. So the Gemara says, well, so listen to this case. Itmar, shtei amos b'shogeg, shtei amos b'mezid, shtei amos b'shogeg. What about the following case? Reuven transfers an object, and the first two amos ultimately again is shogeg, right? So the first two amos is an accident. Here he does b'shogeg. Second two amos he does b'mezid, and third two amos he does b'shogeg again. So we'll see. Interestingly enough, in this case, there's a total of 6 amos. First two shogeg, last two shogeg, middle two mezid. So we'll say. So again, what's unique about this case is what he has transferred an object. Dalid amos b'shogeg. That has happened, but what? The shogeg transfer has been interrupted by 2 amos of mezid in the middle. So says the Gemara, what's the halacha? Rabba Omer Pater. Rabba says you're Pater. Rava Omer Chayiv. Rava says that you're Chayiv. So we'll say, so what's the pshat? So Rabba Omer Pater. Rabba says you're Pater. Why? Afil Rabbi Gamliel Domer Ein Yedil Lechatzi Shir. Because we'll say ultimately again, even according to Rabbi Gamliel, who says that in general, awareness for Chatzi Shir, awareness for a partial amount, a half a shir, ultimately again, Afil Rabbi Gamliel Domer Ein Yedil Lechatzi Shir. Hasam hu dechi kagamar shiura b'shogeg kagamar. Aval halcha d'bemezid lo. So we'll say, Rabbi will say, listen, even Rabbi Gamliel, who says that there is not yediyah awareness for a partial shear is not considered to be a bona fide awareness. That's only when the chatzi shear is b'shogeg, the partial amount is b'shogeg. But if the chatzi shear is b'mezid, like in this case over here, where the partial amount is b'mezid, halakha l'maisa, that awareness is significant. So therefore, Rabbah says at the end of the day, when you completed the unit, remember again, the shear for carrying on Shabbos is Daled Amos. When you completed that shear, you had an awareness of what you're doing. That ultimately characterizes the act, at least as a partial act of mezid, and therefore precludes you from bringing a carbon. So the Gemara says, Aval hacha de b'mezid lo, ubemai. What are we talking about? Ibizoreg shogeku. If you tell me they're talking about a case of throwing, then we'll say again, remember, in that case, when he began to throw the object, he was shogeg. So we'll say we seemingly established the idea that once halacha lamaisa, you began an act of throwing a shogeg, it remains as an act of shogeg. Ela b'mavir. Rather, unless you're talking about a case of where a person is throwing the carrying the object. Rava Amar Chayiv. Rava says no, you'll be chayiv in that case. Why? Afilo l'rabbanan da amri yesh yediyah lechatzi shir. Even according to the Rabbanan who say that there is yediyah, awareness for chatzi shir, for a partial amount, is significant. Hasam hu biyado. That's when you have the ability ultimately to change things. Aval hacha de'in biyado lo. But in a case like this, where once you, we'll see in a case of throwing, once you release the object, you no longer have control over it. No, b'mai, what's the case? Even if you're talking about carrying it, hare biyado, you do have the ability to go ahead and change the course of things. Ve'ela bezorek, but ultimately, again, we're talking about a case of throwing. So I'll say, so just to show the Rambam Paskins in this case, like Rabbah, that halacha l'maisa, if you carry an object 6 amas, right, or for that matter, right, carry an object 6 amas, right, 2 b'shogeg, 2 b'mezid, 2 b'shogeg. Ultimately, again, I will say what we do is, which makes sense, we look at the first 4 amas. In other words, we're not going to start counting the first 2 and the last 2. Rather, we look at the 4 amas that you carried. If at the end of the day, halacha l'maisa, those second 2 amas are b'mezid, you are potter. Now, of course, when we say potter means you're potter from a karban chatos. Of course, it is aser, but you are potter from a chatos. Good. So we'll say, Parak finishes off. Amar Rabba. Zorak v'nacha b'pi hakelev or b'pi hakivshan chayiv. If a person throws an object and the object comes to rest in the mouth of a dog or in the mouth of a furnace, you're chayiv. Which means is that coming to rest in the mouth of a dog, coming to rest in the mouth of a furnace, is tantamount to the object coming to rest, and therefore again one will be chayiv for an act of transfer. We learned in the Mishnah, kolta acher kolta kelev oshnisrfa potter. But we learned in the Mishnah that if you throw an object and it comes to rest, right, the dog catches it in its mouth, or a person catches it, or it gets burned up, that's your potter, which sounds like Rabbi say coming to rest in the mouth of a dog is not considered to be a hanacha, a placement of a dog, a placement of the object in a place of rest. To which the Gemara says, here's the difference. Hasam de lo mechavein, hacha de kamechavein. We'll say, here's the difference. If you don't have in mind that it should come to rest in the mouth of the dog, then enachinami, when the dog catches it, that is not considered to be a hanacha. That's not considered to be a placement of an object. But if your intention was that the object should come to rest in the mouth of the dog, then enachinami, it is considered as if the object has come to rest. To which the Gemara says, we learned this concept as well. So we'll say, what the Mishnah is therefore teaching me is something very interesting. We're going to see this principle espoused in just a moment, which is that halacha l'maisa, there could be certain areas which objectively are not considered to be coming to rest. But if your kavana is for the object to land there, then that goes ahead and classifies that makom, that place, as a makom chashuv, as a place where the object comes to rest in a significant fashion. So what the Gemara is suggesting over is as follows. If I throw an object and my intention is that it lands on the ground, but the dog intercepted it, that's not called an object coming to rest. But if I throw an object and my intention is that Fido, my dog, is going to catch it in its mouth, then when the object comes to rest in the mouth of the dog, that is considered to be halacha l'maisa, as if the object is properly coming to rest. Says the we learned this. Interesting case. Plus, you can have a case of a person who eats something, and he will be chayiv 4 carbon chatos, for one act of consumption, and asham echad, and 1 asham. We'll say, what case is this? Hatame sha'achal chaylev. It would be a person who's tameh, who eats chaylev, forbidden fat, v'hu nosar min mukdashin, and the chaylev is nosar, leftover past the prescribed time from a carbon, b'yom kippurim. He's a busy guy, right? And it's Yom Kippur. So we'll say, if you eat it like this, you're chayiv 4 chatos and 1 asham. If you look at Rashi says over here, dalit chatos, mishum chaylev, 1 chatas because of chaylev, 1 chatas because of nosar, 1 chatas because of eating on Yom Kippur, and 1 chatas ultimately, again, for eating a sacrificial item in a state of ritual impurity. And 1 asham, ultimately, again, will be an asham me'ilos, because you eat something that was really the property of the Kohen. I'm sorry, you ate something that was really the property of the Mizbeach, and therefore you chayv asham. Fine. So the Gemara says, but one second. Rabbi Meir Omer, afim haisa Shabbos v'otzio b'fiv chayv. Rabbi Meir says, I could add on other chatos. What's the other chatos? If it was also Shabbos, he had the chaylev in his mouth and he walked out with it. Say be chayv for an act of hotzah, carrying the chaylev. To which the Gemara says, no, Amar lo enim en Hashem. So they said to Rabbi Meir, no. We're talking about different prohibitions that come out through the act of consumption. What you're describing is not a prohibition that comes about through consumption. That's an additional prohibition. To which the Gemara says, "Va'amai ha'in derech chotza b'kach." 1 second, Rabbi Meir. Why would you be chayiv for transporting chaylev in your mouth on Shabbos? At the end of the day, that's a non-normative transfer, and therefore you should not be chayiv for that. Rather, what do you see from Rabbi saying? That ultimately, because his intention is to transport the chaylev out in his mouth, therefore that makes the mouth into a makom chashav. So I'll say, what do you see again? This is just supporting our previous point. That although, let's say again, a mouth, whether it's of a person or of a dog, would not normally be considered to be a place of rest for an object, if your kavana is that the object should come to rest in that place, then eina chinami, that makes it a makom chashav. Hachanami, so too over here, kevan the kamechavim machshavto mishavle makom. So I'll say, so amazingly enough, if you throw an object and you have intention for it to land on the ground, but your dog intercepts it, your dog ultimately prevents you from becoming chayiv v'chatas, because you have not performed a bona fide act of hotzah. But if your intention is to throw the object and the dog catches it in its mouth, your machshava has made the dog's mouth a makom chashuv, and when the object lands in the dog's mouth, einachinami, you will be chayiv for an act of hotzah. Hadron alach hazorek shkach elosai mazel tov. Amid Beis, new parak. Habona. Habona kama yivna v'yichayiv. So we'll say bona binyan building. Focus on the malacha building. So we'll say how much do you have to build and be chayiv? So we'll remember again, binyan bona is one of the 39 malachas. So the shaila is, how much building does one have to do in order to violate Shabbos? Habona kolshu. We'll say building any amount. Any amount of building will make you liable on Shabbos. V'amisases. Or we'll say, or chiseling. Chiseling is also a form of building. Or makke bepatish, or delivering the final hammer blow on something is also considered to be a form of bona. Interestingly enough, we'll discuss this. We saw makke bepatish, delivering the final hammer blow, as a separate one of the avos malachos, as one of the 39 malachos. We'll discuss how to deal with that. But the Gemara says delivering the final hammer blow to something is also called bona. Ubema'atzeit, and I will say ultimately again, ma'atzeit literally is a sledgehammer, right? Whether it's makim b'patish with a small hammer, with a sledgehammer, hakodeach kolshu, drilling any amount, is also binyan kolshu chayiv. Ze'aklal. So we'll say this is the principle. Kala osim malacha malachtam iskemes b'shabes chayiv. Anytime you do a malacha, and your malacha endures. We'll say, sounds like over here that halacha l'maisa, in order for you to be chayiv for malacha on Shabbos, you must do something which endures, which lasts. So anytime you do malacha on Shabbos, and the malacha endures, you chayiv. Omer afhamaka bekurnus alasdan b'shas malacha. So too again, Shmuel Gamliel says, if you bang a hammer against an anvil on Shabbos, you will be chayiv. Why? Ultimately, again, because I will say what it literally sounds like is because you are literally because you're fixing something, it's like a malacha. So again, we'll see in the Gemara exactly what that means. So I will say, the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara will say, it just happens to be interesting. If you look, well, I'll give you Omar and Makam. We'll take a look at that Tosas Makeh Bepatish. So Tosas points out an interesting machlokes Rashi and Ri, ultimately again about what exactly where banging a hammer against something was done in the Mishkan. So again, we'll see later on in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Kol Shulamai Chazia. So we'll say, remember again, the Mishnah said that when it comes to building, if you build any amount, you're chayv on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, any amount, what does that mean? Or as we'll say, what is any amount? Again, remember, we've seen throughout Hilchos Shabbos, all of Shabbos is about shiurim, right? It's all about measurements. So what do you mean if you build any amount on Shabbos Yechayiv? What purposeful malacha could be done in any amount? Or for example, Shekein ani chofer guma latznia ba prutosav. So we'll say, for example, let's say again, a person dug a small hole. So the Gemara is suggesting even digging a small hole could be an issue of binyan, could be an issue of building on Shabbos. Who digs small holes? So for example, an ani, a pauper, digs a small hole in order to go ahead and hide his money. Hide his pennies. So the Gemara says, the Kavasikai Mishkan, and we find the same malacha done by the Mishkan, because by the Mishkan, Shekain, Tofre Yerias, Tofrin, Chofrin Guma, Latznia Ba Machteyan. Because we'll say those who would go ahead and sew the curtains of the Mishkan would dig a little hole to hide their needles. Their sewing needles. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Amar Abaye, Kevan the Mishtachi Lahavdachi. No, they didn't. No one ever did that in the Mishkan. They wouldn't dig a hole to hide their needles for one simple reason. If you bury a needle in the dirt, what happens? It rusts. And if the needle rusts, it doesn't serve any purpose. So no one did that. Ella shekin ani osa pit pute kira kitana lishpos ale kedera kitana. Rather, I will say, what's an example of a small act of binyan? An ani, a pauper, will make a very small, we'll say literally means a very small tripod. What you would do is if you had, let's say, an oven, you would make a little tripod in which to put your pot on the oven or in the oven. So an ani would make a very little tripod, just all he needs is a little one for his oven. The kavase gabi mishkas was that would be quote unquote a small act of binyan. So we find the parallel case, the kavase gabi mishkan. So we'll say, where do we find such a case in the Mishkan? By mevashle samamonim, litzvo yirios shechazra malachton. So we'll say, remember again, they would go ahead and they would have to boil up herbs to create dye in order to go ahead and dye the curtains. So sometimes if they were just missing a little bit of dye, you don't have to make a whole pot of dye just for a little piece of the curtain that remain undyed. So what would they do? They would boil up a little pot. So for a little pot, you need a little tripod, right? Rav Acha says no one did that in the Mishkan. Ein aniyos b'makom ashiros. Rabbi say there is no poverty in a place of wealth, which means what? In the Mishkan, Rabbi say in the Mishkan, they did everything on a grand scale. So if they're boiling up herbs to make dye, it was one zaftig pot of herbs. In other words, they were not making a little patala, a little bit of herbs. That's not how it was done in the Mishkan. Ein aniyos b'makom ashiros. There is no poverty in a place of wealth. So we'll say, so what's the case of a small amount of binyan? Ella shekin balabayis sheyesh lo neke bibiraso. So small, very simple. I will say, if you have a hole in the wall of your mansion, so what do? You plug the hole. In other words, I will say, no one says, it's just a small hole in the wall of my mansion. We'll just leave it alone, right? A balabas would still plug even a small hole in the grandest of mansions. De kavase gabe mishkan. Such an act would occur in the Mishkan as well. Shekin keresh shenafla bodarna. Let's say that if they had a board, and let's say you had a little hole in the board. How would you get a hole in the board? A worm bore through it. See, if you had a little hole in a board of the Mishkan, what would you do? Matif lesocha ever v'sosmo. They would pour a little bit of lead into the hole in order to go ahead and close up the hole. So we'll say, so there you see a small act of binyan. So even if you have a massive mansion and all you have is a little hole in one of the walls, you'll plug that up. You're chayiv for binyan. Remember again, anything that you have in Hilchos Shabbos, you must be able to demonstrate was done in the Mishkan. So where was such a small little act of binyan of building done in the Mishkan? Very simple. If there was a hole that developed in one of the boards, even a tiny hole because a worm bored through it, they would go ahead and close up that hole with a little bit of lead. Good. Amr Shmuel. So Shmuel says something very interesting. Amr Shmuel. Hamitzad is ha'evan chayiv. Very interesting case. Shmuel says, if a person positions a stone on Shabbos. Now, looking at Ashwin, what this means. Hamitzad is ha'evan. Moshiva umitzadada ad shebes yasheves bekarkos yisoda binyon yofa mitoch shu mitzadada hu mechina tachtea umoshiva ba'aretz chayiv va'afilu lo nosan tit have bona kolshehu v'yesh mekayim kemotis. Well, this is actually fascinating. If you position a stone in the foundation of a building, even if you don't apply any mortar or any cement, you'll still be chayiv. Rabbi Sir actually points out something very interesting. Apparently, they had ways of positioning stones as foundation stones where they would wedge it in the earth in such a way that it did not need any additional mortar or cement or plaster in order to remain in place. So if you go ahead and you do that on Shabbos, you are chayiv for bona. Now what's the novelty? The novelty in that is that what am I doing? All I'm really doing is placing down a stone, right? It's not like I'm using cement or mortar or anything else. I'm just placing it down, but I'm positioning it specifically that it could serve as a foundation stone. I'm chayiv for building on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, raise a kasha, echad anosin es ha'aven, ve'echad anosin es hatit, hanosin es hatit chayiv. What was that? We learned elsewhere that if Ruvain puts down the stone and Shimon puts on the mortar, it's Shimon who is chayiv for the act of bona. Why? Because an act of placing a stone by itself, the Gemara says, is not significant. What's significant? When you put the mortar on the stone. To which the Gemara says, L'tamech ima seifa. Rabbi Yossi Omer, V'afilu ha'ela v'eniach agabe dimo shel avanim chayiv. Rabbi Yossi said that Rabbi said, even if all you do is place one stone on the row of another bunch of stones, you'll be chayiv for bona also. So what's going on over here? Is the placement of a stone enough to make you chayiv for building on Shabbos, or do you require the application of some type of cement as well? Here you go. It's actually quite fascinating. Ella, Tlasa binyani havam. Rather, it's actually fascinating. When building a home, there are often 3 rows of stones. Now, by the way, rows doesn't actually have to just mean rows. It could just mean 3 sections. Tasa, mitzia ila. A bottom section, a middle section, and an upper section. Watch this. Tasa, baitzidude va'afra. The bottom Rabbi say often just required the stones to be wedged in the dirt. So apparently you could build the foundation without any mortar, without any cement. All you need to do is properly wedge the stones in the dirt. So therefore, we understand if you were correctly in the ground, you're chayiv for bona. You're chayiv for building. Mitzia, boy namitina. Ultimately, the middle section of stones requires cement. That requires cement to hold it in place. Elohi, the upper level of stones, interestingly enough, bahanocha ba'alma. I'll say those you could just place on top. Those don't even require being wedged anywhere. Those, ultimately, again, you could just go ahead and place on top. Quite amazing. Rashi says, Dimos aliyun she'in alav gabav, od dimos in chosheshim nota even litzad echad, hilchach ba'nach alav masagi. So I'll say, this is really just a fascinating insight into Talmudic building practices. Right? That halacha l'maisa, the foundation stones, they were just wedged into the earth. The middle section had stones and cement. And interestingly enough, the upper sections, I guess, were heavy enough stones that you could just place it down without any wedging and without any cement. Good. So therefore, you see, depending on what section of the structure you are building, will determine ultimately again how you violate Shabbos. Says Rav Masase is chiseling. Masase is mishum mai mechayir. We'll say in general, what are you chayiv for when you chisel something? So Rav or mishum bon. Rav says you're chayiv for building. Ushmul amar mishum maki bepatish. Shmuel says that you're chayiv because of makeh bepatished. Ha'oseh nakav bulul shel tarnagol. And what happens if you make a hole in a chicken coop? Then I both say, why would someone make a hole in a chicken coop? So if you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here. So first of all, look at makeh bepatish. Gimar melachahu shebemakom shecharetz charetz ze lo yachrotz od. So therefore, I both say the Gemara suggests as follows. So I'm sorry, chicken coop bulul shel tarnagol and shel eitz. So apparently, what does it mean to make a hole in a chicken coop? It means ventilation. Ventilation, otherwise the chicken coop smells very badly, and that can be detrimental to the chickens. So what happens if you make a hole in a chicken coop? You would create ventilation for this, a ventilated chicken coop. So what are you chayiv for? So the Gemara says, Rav Ar Mishum Boneh. Rav says it's building. Ushmul Ar Makeh Bepatish. Shmuel says ultimately again, this is makeh bepatish, this is delivering the final hammer blow, right? Completing an object. So therefore again, in the case of chiseling, again, Rav says building, Shmuel says completing, right? Makeh bepatish. Making ventilation in the chicken coop, Rav says building, Shmuel says makeh bepatish. Ayil shufsa bikofina demara. Rabbi say what happens. Now remember again, kofina demara means Rabbi say you have a hoe, right? Like a hoeing instrument. So Rabbi say, so what happens? The hoe is made up of 2 parts. There's the bottom like hoe object, and then there is the handle. Well, when you would fit the handle into the top of the hoe, you would insert another peg there in order to lock it in place. What happens if you put in that peg on Shabbos? Rav Ar Mishum Bon, Rav says that's called building. Ushmuel makeh patish. Shmuel says that's called makeh bepatish. Utzricha. Now both say, now I need all three cases. Why do I need all three cases? Because if we would have just had the first case of chiseling, Rav would say because again it's the normal derech of building to chisel stones. Aval osa nekev below shulchan hagolim, but making the hole in the chicken coop, the ventilation, the derech binyan bekach. That's not part of building. I would say that he would agree with Shmuel. That's called makeh bepatish, not building. And if it would have just taught us the case of the chicken coop, I would have said that it's in the chicken coop case, or I've said that it's bona, that it's building, because again, ventilation is part of building. But putting the peg into to secure the hole. Ultimately, again, I would have thought that's not called building, and he would agree with Shmuel, that's called makeh bepatish. And if he would have just said this last case of the hoe, Baha Kamar Shmuel, Rav, but in the other two cases, that's only where Shmuel says it's makeh bepatish. But in the other two cases, he agrees with Rav. That's what? That it is binyan. Therefore, again, svicha. There will say again. I need the machlokes in all three cases. I could not learn out one case only. But what you see from here is a fascinating machlokes in Rav and Shmuel. That's when you go ahead and you put the finishing touches on that. So do we look at that as boneh or do we look at that as makeh bepatish? That's the machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Rabbi will stop over here for today, and in Eretz Hashem we'll continue with that machlokes tomorrow. Rabbi Yasher Koyach. So again, for those joining us for the Zoom meeting, Eretz Hashem will end this chat or end this room and this class, and then begin again in Eretz Hashem just a